Jesus calms the storm. One evening, as the sun was setting, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they left the crowd behind and got into a boat. Jesus, tired from a long day, laid down in the back of the boat and fell asleep on a cushion. As they sailed, a furious storm swept across the lake. Waves crashed over the boat and water began to fill it. The disciples were afraid. They woke Jesus and cried out, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus got up, stood in the boat, and calmly said to the wind and the waves, "Peace, be still." Immediately, the wind died down, and the lake became perfectly still. He turned to his disciples and said, gently, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were amazed and whispered to one another, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." He turned to his disciples and said gently, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were amazed and whispered to one another, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Elijah and the whisper of God, 1 Kings 19:1-18. Elijah, a prophet of God, was afraid. He had just faced down false prophets, but now he was running for his life. He fled into the wilderness and sat under a tree, exhausted. He prayed, "I have had enough. Lord, take my life." But instead of rebuking him, God sent an angel with food and water. The angel said, "Get up and eat." Elijah rested, ate, and slept again. Then, with new strength, he traveled to Mount Horeb there. He hid in a cave. God said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah poured out his heart, and God told him to stand on the mountain. A mighty wind tore through the hills, but God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake shook the ground, but God was not in the earthquake. Next came a fire, but God was not in the fire. Then came a gentle whisper, and in the whisper, Elijah heard the voice of God. "The Lord is my shepherd." Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Jesus heals Jairus' daughter, Mark 5:21-43. A man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came to Jesus and fell at his feet. He pleaded, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and lay your hands on her so she will live." Jesus went with him, but as they walked, people crowded around. News came that the girl had died. "Don't bother the teacher anymore," they said. But Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe." They arrived at Jairus' house. People were crying and mourning loudly. Jesus said, "Why all this commotion? The child is not dead but asleep." He went inside with the child's parents. He took the little girl's hand and said, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, she stood and began to walk. Everyone was amazed. God provides manna in the desert. Exodus 16. The Israelites were traveling through the desert after escaping Egypt, but they were hungry and began to complain. "We should have stayed in Egypt they said. At least there we had food. But God heard them. That evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning, a fine, flaky substance appeared on the ground like frost. They called it manna, and Moses told them, "This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." Each morning, they gathered just enough for that day, and every day, God provided faithfully and lovingly. Samuel hears God's voice. 1 Samuel 3. Young Samuel lived in the temple, serving under Eli the priest. One night, as he was lying down, he heard a voice, "Samuel." He got up and ran to Eli. "Here I am," he said. "You called me." But Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." This happened 3 times. Then Eli realized it was God calling Samuel. He told Samuel, "If he calls again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So when Samuel heard the voice again, he answered, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And that night, God began to speak to Samuel and lead him in a special way. Jesus feeds the 5,000. John 6:1-14. A large crowd had followed Jesus to hear him teach. When it grew late, Jesus asked his disciples how they would feed the people. A young boy offered 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. Jesus took the bread and fish, gave thanks, and began to distribute the food. To everyone's amazement, the food multiplied. All 5,000 people ate until they were full, and there were 12 baskets of leftovers. God can do so much with even a little when it is placed in his hands. Paul and Silas sing in prison. Acts 16:40. Paul and Silas were put in prison for sharing the gospel. Their feet were fastened in stocks, and they were locked in a cell. But at midnight, they began to pray and sing hymns to God. The other prisoners listened. Suddenly, a great earthquake shook the prison. The doors flew open, and their chains came loose. The jailer was afraid, thinking everyone had escaped. But Paul shouted, "Don't worry, we're all here." The jailer fell before them and asked, "What must I do to be saved?" They answered, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved." Even in chains, God was working miracles. The parable of the prodigal son, Luke 15:11-32, RSV, arranged for peaceful reading. Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that belongs to me.' So the father divided his living between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a far country. There, he squandered his property in reckless living. After he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that land, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He was so hungry that he longed to eat the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Then he came to himself and said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I am dying here with hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' So he rose and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and embraced him and kissed him. The son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father father said to his servants, "Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now the older son was in the field. As he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was happening. The servant said, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But the older son was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and pleaded with him, but he said to his father, "Look, all these years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has wasted your property with immoral living, you killed the fatted calf for him." The father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours.